All right, everybody, we are hopping into an LR tier list here. Now, this is going to be Carnival and Dokkan Fest LRs post-worldwide celebration. How do I rank them? Different things like that. So that's what this is going to be, is a tier list going over those units. Just some parameters that I want to go over here, first of all, is the coatings on the side, like the colors, indicate that those indicate tiers, essentially. So characters in the same tier, you could argue them above or below each other, like however you want. I just think that that's kind of the general tier that they're in. So if you're like, oh, I think number 7 should be number 4, yeah, sure. I mean, that's fine. That's kind of how I'm feeling about this. That's kind of the distinctions that I have going on. Now, you'll notice here, 1, 2, and 3, they're all different colors, but they're all kind of like the same shade of red. That's kind of saying, I think each of these are in essentially their own tier. I, personally, the way I would rank them, I couldn't really put one above the other. Notice how 2 and 3, by the way, are, like, pretty close in color. Those are the ones where it's like, yeah, sure, if you wanted to put 3 above 2, or, you know, or 2 below 3... sure, like, fine. I wouldn't argue it too hard, but personally, I think that number 1 is a hard number 1, I think number 2 is a hard number 2, and I think 3 is a hard number 3, so, like, I wouldn't really, like, I feel like whenever I made this list, I went boom, 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 and I set those 3, and I went, would I put 2 above 1, and I went, maybe in some situations, but I think 1 is for sure better. Would I put 3 above 2, and I was like, maybe there are some situations where I could, but... so that's kind of what I have going on there, is like, I do think they are individually 1, 2, and 3. And personally, I think that there's enough separation that I wouldn't really put them in the same tier. But then 4, you know, 4 through 7, those can just be intermingled however you want. And then 8, 9, and 10, those can also be intermingled. Now, I did do some cheating. There are actually going to be 12 characters on this list, and we'll talk about that whenever I get there. But let's go ahead and start off, and by the way, if you have different opinions about this, let me know down in the comments below. I'm sure people will... like, I'm going to put first couple characters on this list, and people are going to be really mad, but, you know, give me a chance to talk about when I talk about. And a lot of this is just based on my own personal, like, usage of these characters. So that's what I'm going to be talking about here. You know, if you go into events in a certain unit that performs poorly for me, is always on God time for you, you know, I understand if you want to rank them higher. Like, that totally makes sense to me. So, let's start out with number 10, or I guess I should say numbers 10, or however you want to say it. That's going to be the Blue Fusions. The Blue Fusions are insanely good for the new Red Zone stages here. However, there are 2 fights in the game now that they are really not strong against, and kind of 3. And those are the 3 major AoE fights that we have. We have Sin Shinron, Omega, and now Zamasu. And I really do not want to use these characters in those fights. You can kind of get away with it against Omega. Kinda, maybe, sorta. Because at least... actually, I don't know. Because... I don't like running these guys against Omega. I don't think they're very good against Omega. You can get away with it with Sin, kinda, but, I mean, there have been times where I've tried to run these guys against Sin, and they just get caught, and they're the reasons I lose. And then Zamasu, like, there's zero chance you get away running these guys against Zamasu, unless you get really lucky with them dodging. Their issue is that, you know, the whole... like, really nice thing about their kit is, like, okay, we get them turn 1, we float them off, they have a 70% chance to dodge as the attacker in the 3rd slot. Here's the issue. They have to actually attack first to get that 70% chance to dodge in slot 3, and so against these major AoE bosses, they just get blown off the page, and I really have to deduct a lot of points for that. Another thing that's important for me is leader skills. You'll notice that pretty much every other character that we put above them, barring 1, all have, like, very modern, like, usable leader skills that you can use in events. These guys are okay, but Potara and Final Trump Card, not, and then, like, what is it, Fusion and Final Trump Card, and it's only, like, what, 170? Like, these guys aren't 200% leaders, and you probably don't want to be running 2 of them, you know? It's just, like, it's not what you want to do. So, they lose some points in the leader skill. I mean, but they're great units. For every fight except for the AoE fights, they are absolutely fantastic. But right now, the AoE fights are the hardest in the game, and if I'm going to rank characters 1 to 10, I feel like the hardest fight in the game should have the most weight. And it's not just one fight, it's two now. And it's probably what's going to be, pushed moving forward. We've seen now the last two hardest actually the last three hardest boss fights they've added to the game have all been AoE bosses. So I would expect more to show up in the future. So... and I'm not saying, like, Sin Shinron is the third hardest fight in the game currently. I just mean, like, when he released, he was, like, the hardest fight, right? So... Alright, so that's number 10, is the Blue Fusions. Again, they're very powerful. They're going to dominate pretty much any non-AoE boss in any short content fight, which we have a lot of right now. My issue is just that, man, those AoEs are hitting them hard, and the units above them generally have tools that they can use to help minimize that damage, or they just become so oppressive later in the fight that, I just rank them above them. But these guys are good. Me putting them at 10 here, it's not bad. I'm not saying they're bad. I'm saying these guys are really good. I just think that the units above them are doing more for the team. So I know this is going to make some people upset, but... it is what it is. Now, next up, this is really going to make some people mad. This next ranking, I'm sorry, but we got Super Saiyan 4 Goku and Trunks. Now, you're probably wondering why I'm putting them in the same tier. Like, you see these two together, and you're like, okay, sure, whatever. It's the Blue Fusions. They're practically the same unit. I get why they're in the same tier. These two are more similar than people act like they are, right? So, Goku, what is it? He needs to get hit 5 times, I believe, to get his standby. I'm pretty sure he needs to get hit 5 times to get his standby. I've found, for the most part, I'm not getting him to stand by until about turn 5. I do have this guy. I have a JP account, and I actually do have this guy at 55%. I've seen a lot of showcases of him. I generally know his, average performance, things like that. And, it's like turn 5 is typically where I'm getting his standby. And these guys both have very similar things whenever they go into their standby. This guy's standby, he becomes a defensive wall. I mean, so does Trunks, right? He becomes a defensive wall, and, like, he can't take damage for the first couple of turns. He's supporting your team. Like, it's very powerful. Trunks is a very similar thing. He cannot stand by until his 5th turn. Now, that could be turn 5 if you get him on turn 1. If you get him in turn 2, it's going to be turn 6. And if you get him in turn 3, if you get him in slot 7, you get him in turn 3, then it's not going to be turn 7 until you can stand by. So I do find that very similar. And these guys in their base forms are not super impressive. Goku has to go in slot 1, and these new bosses, he doesn't really tank particularly well against them. And Trunks is basically locked to slot 2, which I don't really like. Whenever I think about characters, ranking them in the top 10, the units that get really high on my list are characters that it's like, I don't have to worry about them. I can put them in slot 1, and they're going to be fine. I can put them in slot 2, and they're going to be fine. It's like, I can put them wherever I need to and really get flexible with the team building, or they're just providing so much extra value to the team that, I can rank them higher, so... Trunks in his base form is not really doing anything for you. He's just doing a ton of damage. And there are a lot of int bosses right now, but sometimes that can be bad. These new fights are so short that they don't really give you time to build up. So if you have a character that's just blitzing you through the first phase and saying, here you go, and tossing you off to the next rotation that maybe you haven't had a chance to get built up on yet, like, that could be a bad thing. If you're going too soon into that physical Zamasu phase, that could be bad for you depending on the team you're running. It's like, dude, I haven't even had time to set up my rotations, and here you are doing so much damage that you're throwing me into the next phase. That's not necessarily a good thing always. Damage is cool, but it's like, sometimes you need time to get things set up and going before you start doing damage. So that actually can be a hindrance for you. I know it's like saying, oh, we're doing too much damage, but it's like, really? And then a lot of times, I have seen my Trunks, he's rainbowed Link level 10 with a full dodge build. He gets clapped up by some of these bosses. Like, he'll just have, like, bad turns where he only gives you 2 super attacks, and he just gets messed up in his base form. And it's kind of a similar thing with Goku. Both of these guys, if you can get this guy into a standby, and if you can get this guy into full power, they're outstanding units. Like, full power is crazy. Like, nobody does it quite like full power. And this guy in his standby, he's super defensive. He can do, like, 5 super attacks. I mean, that's great and all, right? I love that. The point being is that you're not getting to those forms until later into the fight. These new fights are generally wrapping up on turns 5 through 7. And if you're not hitting your strongest point until that point, whenever the fight is, like, almost over or completely over, like, you're doing nothing special for me at that point, and I have to deduct points for that. So that's kind of why these guys are down here. They are similar, right? Both of them, they're weak at the start. And then, you know, they get into their standby and they become very powerful. And then, you know, Trunks exits his standby and he doesn't really do anything fancy. He doesn't attack, and then he goes back into his kind of mid-state. But, you know, Super Saiyan 4 Goku, the reason I kind of have him ahead in the list a little bit here is because he gives you the full heal whenever you come out of the standby. And then he's also just like a god outside of his standby. So it's like he has the really good defense, and then in the support, which the support I also value quite a bit as well. And then, you know, and then he has like the really big damage, and then he's also super defensive once he comes out. So, and then the heal is also very nice. I tend to rank mid-battle heals pretty highly, so yeah, that's kind of why I have these guys down in the tier. I know this is going to make people upset. People like to, like, if we're ever going to call a unit like a Twitter clip unit, it's going to be this strong. So, like, how can he be bad? He, you know, survive. It's like, guys, listen. This is the brand new Part 2 Carnival headlining LR, right? Like, this whole celebration was, like, based on Trunks, essentially, right? And this guy struggles to tank boss super attacks. That's not good from a premium summonable unit. If they're going to put this guy on a 10 featured LR banner or whatever it was and charge you money to obtain this guy, he needs to be able to tank supers easily, not be an RNG nightmare for his first 2 rotations, and then hopefully, cross your fingers, he's, you know, you can get into his standby in a reasonable state before you just get killed, right? So, not a huge fan of this Trunks, unfortunately. I've had him fail me way too many times, and I do not get that standby nearly enough to ever justify bringing him on a team. So that's how I feel about him. And then Goku, dude, I need him on my global account so I can do a proper evaluation, but I just, man, it's like these new red zone stages really hurt him. Now, he is a god against Omega, but, man, that Fusion Zamasu fight really kind of hurt this guy as well. Okay, number 8, next up, again, we're making people really mad is this guy right here. I think this unit is pretty overrated by the community. This unit is great for 2 rotations. They are awesome for 2 rotations. I love them. They dodge. Now, here's the thing, right? I found these guys still take damage in their base form because they're only getting that 1 defensive stack, like, whenever they super attack. They take damage. Like, you take them against that Fusion Zamasu fight, like, you put them in slot 1, they can take damage. Like, people act like this unit is invincible. They have a 50% chance to dodge, which is nice, but go watch my videos. Go watch every single time I bring this unit into, like, that Fusion Zamasu fight. Watch how many times I put them in slot 1, hoping for them to dodge, and then they just don't. Go watch how many times these guys have eaten that Int Fusion Zamasu super attack, and you'll see why I have them at 8. This unit pisses me off like no other unit. It's like, they're not doing their job in base form. I bring them in base form, I put them in slot 1, I just say dodge. All I ask of you is that you dodge, or you eat the attacks well, and they don't really do either of those things for me. And then I get later into the fight, and it's like, oh, their guard is worn out. What do I do now? Like, they're just a defenseless worm at this point. They were a complete liability. It's like, oh, we can't fuse. Sorry, guess I should have played better. You know, my slot 1 unit that I left on rotation, oh, I guess I should have floated them on their first two rotations. Because, you know, if you leave them on rotation, sorry, you can't fuse, because you're going to get to turn 5. Because these bosses typically don't really whittle you down. They're typically just blowing you off the page, like in full health shots, right? Or they'll do a huge chunk of damage to you, and then you'll have like a character like the GT Duo heal up back up for you, or you'll have like a unit that heals, and you'll kind of heal your way back up to full health. And I found it very inconsistent to get this unit into a range where I'm consistently healing whenever they need to on like turn 5 or their 5th turn. That's the other issue. Their transformation condition is so bad. Their 5th turn, was it under 70% HP? I think is what it is. That is so bad. So bad. The point being is it's their 5th turn and an HP condition. Horrible. Or turn 7. Turn 7 is really late. Like, if you're getting to turn 7, the fight's typically over. So it's like, I just don't like it. I don't like their fusing condition. They're super inconsistent. They personally fail me way too much as a unit to put them any higher on the list. I would love to. I'd love to get them up into the 7 through 4 tier and say, yeah, they're a great unit. I love them. But it's like they're doing like no damage in their base form, even if you're putting them in slots 2 or 3. But if you put them in slots 2 or 3, then they're going to be taking damage from some of these bosses, which is crazy. Like, I just don't like it. I really do not like their design. They're just really underpowered. If I was to fix this unit, I would have given them 30% defense on their 12 key for 1 turn. I think you do that, and I actually like this unit a lot better, and I don't think that makes them broken or anything. I think that just makes them, like, a viable unit. It's really unfortunate, this unit right here. It's like, man, like, look at this. These are, like, 2 new featured units. I did not think that I would have them down here this low. And again, I know some people are going to have them ranked all the way up here, but it's like, guys, listen, go watch my videos and you'll understand. Like, people who have been watching my videos throughout worldwide, you've seen these units fail me consistently, you'll understand, right? So that's why they're down here. Next up, I'm going to go ahead and bring the next 2 in here. We're going to talk about these 2 because they're very similar. So, Vegeta and Trunks and, you know, Carnival Goku right here. Now, people are going to see this, and they're going to get mad, because people have always underrated this unit. They have been waiting, they have been preying on their downfall since day 1. But guys, this unit can tank in slot 1. You know, turn 1, they're a little bit suspect. They can be. But they'll tank it. They will survive, right? I have not found a scenario where I put these guys in slot 1, and they are the reason that I die. I put them in slot 1, they take their hits, they get built up, and if they're able to super attack first, they're totally fine. Now, if they take the super attack before they super, I mean, that's unfortunate, but guys, how many units in the game right now can tank in slot 1? How many units can do that? Before they super attack, how many units are tanking in slot 1? Not many. The only unit below them that I would consider, like, that I would say could tank better than them in slot 1, turn 1, is, like, this guy right here, if they dodge it, or this guy, if it's a beam super attack and he can nullify it. That is, like, the only 2 units that tank better than this guy below them in slot 1. You know, these guys aren't ranked yet, but, I mean, you look at this list, right? You're not, like, this guy in slot 1 is taking way more damage than them. This guy you can't even put in slot 1. These guys you can't put in slot 1. This guy you can put in slot 1 and they have a chance to dodge. Sure, I'll give them that. But the thing I like about Vegeta and Trunks is that as the fight goes on, they get stronger. Whereas this unit, as the fight goes on, they become weaker and possibly really inconsistent and a liability. This unit becomes a stone wall for you in slot 1 and just does a really good job. And worst case scenario against, like, the new Fusion Zamasu is they have guard for their first 5 turns on most team builds. You know, you just have to bring, like, a bond to parent and child, whatever. That's easy to do. Bond to parent and child is a huge category. So, worst case scenario, you can float them off against Merge Zamasu and not even have to worry about them. So, I found this unit very effective in all fights in the game right now. It's like they're good for Omega. They're good for Fusion Zamasu. They're really good for, you know, all the red zone stages. Like, I have not found a place where Vegeta and Trunks don't excel. Like, they're just so good. And then you start talking about leader skill. You know, these guys have a really good leader skill. You know, we're starting to get into these units that have pretty good leader skills. Theirs is also very good. Future Saga just got a ton of buffs. You know, I can talk about how these guys are fumbled a little bit here, but there were so many Future Saga buffs during the Worldwide Celebration that it just helped this unit more than anything. One of the most powerful parts about this unit's kit was their active skill. And, you know, it was a little bit inconsistent, you know, prior to the celebration, but now we have so many Future Saga units running around, and Future is a real meta team that you can consistently get their active skill on turn 3, which can really help them and the units around them. I don't think people talk about that enough, how, like, consistent it is to get their active skill on, like, their second rotation now, which can really shore up their defense. It can make all the other units on your rotation more powerful, and, you know, one of the weaknesses right now of these events is we need more defensive characters. So a unit that makes your characters more defensive is really valuable to me. I think that's one of these intangible things that I'm going to be talking about with these upper tier units that just make you a really valuable character for your team. These guys can tank in the hardest slot in the game, you know, which is slot 1. And, you know, people are going to say, oh, they still take 300, you know, 400k damage. And it's like, guys, we're not in, you know, 2021 anymore where 700k is a ton of HP. We have teams pushing like 800 plus HP now. Like, you take 300k, that's nothing. That's, like, relative to the amount of HP that we have now, that is completely survivable, and in some cases is beneficial for your team for units like this who need to be at low HP in order to fuse. I have had no issues running this character. Every time I hop into a new red zone event, they are on the team if they fit on the team build in the leader skill, right? So I really love running this unit. I have no issues. They have a great link set. Their active skill provides a ton of support. They hold down slot 1, they guard if I need to move them into another slot and float them off. Just absolute great unit. I love them. And Carnival Goku is very similar. He also has a Ki Blast nullification, so he can just block Zamasu's super attack, which is really nice. He builds up at about the same rate as them, and then he also has the heal, which can really bail out some of your teams. You know, Zamasu will kind of whittle you down a little bit. You know, I was talking about how bosses don't really whittle you down. Well, Zamasu kind of can. He'll just whittle you down to, like, really low HP before he kills you. Like, whenever I'm talking about whittling you down, I'm thinking about a boss like the Cell Max Red Zone, who's going to do, like, 100k damage to you just, like, each turn over time, and, like, as you go throughout the fight, you're losing maybe, like, 100,000 HP per turn, or, like, 150, 200k, something like that, and you're just, like, getting chunks taken off per turn. Zamasu is whittling you down, but it's within the same turn. Like, you're coming out of that first rotation a lot of the times, and you have, like, 20,000 HP or something like that. That's where a character like this Carnival Goku, who does have the intangible of the heal. Like, that heal is super valuable, and it can bail you out of a lot of bad situations. So, that heal is what makes him super powerful. The reason he's below Vegeta and Trunks, it really just comes down to the leader skill. I think Vegeta and Trunks have the better leader skill. That's really all it comes down to. I think they both have powerful effects that help the team. Theirs is the active skill for the defense. His is the healing. They both have guard and kind of be put into multiple slots. They both stack defense. They both build up pretty easily. They both have good key mechanics. So it really just comes down to their leader skill for me. But again, they're in the green tier, so if you wanted to move this guy up to as high as 4, I think that's fine. So that's kind of where I'm at with these two characters right here. They're both doing very similar things. You know, they're guarding. You can put them in any slot, like I said. They bring the intangibles of the active skill and the healing. I'm just repeating what I said 2 seconds ago, but you guys kind of get what I mean here. Is that, like, these units, honestly, I could put in the same tier and squeak another unit into this list, but I couldn't think of a unit to put at 11, so I didn't do that, but I think these two units are very, very, very underrated, and they're some of the best units to run against that Fusion Zamasu fight. I mean, they're just absolutely incredible, so that's how I'm feeling. You know, slot 1 units, if you're a slot 1 unit, you get a ton of extra bonus points in my tier lists. So that's kind of how I'm feeling about them. Next up, I'm going to bring in the GT Duo. Now, this unit is still really powerful, and they're still really good for pretty much all of the fights in the game, but this unit takes way too much damage from Fusion Zamasu for me to have them much higher up in the list. And again, I think the top 3 is so tight, like, I don't think that they can crack into the top 3, but if you wanted to move this unit up to 4, I think 4 is another really good spot for them. I really couldn't decide whether I wanted to have them at 5 or 4, so that's why, you know, like, this green tier, you can kind of shuffle these characters up as much as possible. If you think this unit should be 4, that's fine. But I think at this point, you guys can kind of get an idea of what, you know, 1, 2, 3, and 4 is going to look like just based on, you know, this and the general thoughts I've had up to this point. But this unit right here, they really just take... previously, they were at number 1 in my last tier list coming out of the 8th anniversary. They were just so powerful. There was, like, no boss in the game that could really hurt them. You just throw them comfortably in slot 2. Their team was super powerful. You could bring them into any fight in the game. I felt comfortable running 2 of them. It was great. Right now, I don't really like running their team. You can in every fight in the game, for the most part, except for the most important one, which is Fusion Zamasu. Fusion Zamasu just does too much damage on these guys on turn 1. There have been so many times I load into the fight, and I'm just like, well, we lost, because I have both of these guys. I have the leader and the friend unit in the same rotation running their team, and they're both going to take, like, 330k damage from the AoE, and we're pretty much just out of there. Like, it gives you no wiggle room, and, like that does take a lot of points off. Now, they're still really good. They're still as good as they were, pretty much. I mean, you put them in slot 2, you're able to get their damage reduction built up. They're still great. They have the revive. That's the intangible that they kind of have that makes them super valuable. I just think that they take way too much damage from Fusion Zamasu. Now, once you get into the second phase, they're great against the physical phase. But again, they're not a slot 1 unit. So they do lose points there. You don't want to pretty much ever put this unit in slot 1 unless you can get attacks off first. If you can get attacks off first, sure, whatever, put them in slot 1. But they do lose bonus points for not being a slot 1 unit, like, ever. Considering the other units that I have up 1 through 4. So again, like, right here, it's like they are still very good. They're still very powerful. The revive is super great, and they're great for pretty much every red zone fight except for the Fusion Zamasu. However, you know, it's a little bit tougher these days. You know, taking 300k damage on your first turn against Fusion Zamasu is definitely not favorable. I mean, you guys are going to notice this unit right here didn't even make the list. I do not like running this unit. I just don't think they're good enough. Their only value to me is if I get them into their standby, and it's inconsistent. Like, I have not found usage for this character very much. Like, I would rather run all of these characters here above this unit. I don't think they're good enough, you know? So, this guy being at 5, it's not saying that they're bad. Again, I could see them at 4. You could maybe get me to say that they're 3, maybe, but I think 4 is a good spot for them. So again, if you want to put them at 4 or 5, go for it. I still think they're a really good unit, but man, they just take way too much damage from the Fusion Zamasu AoE. Next up, we have Fusion Zamasu himself at number 4. Now, people are going to see that, and they're going to be kind of confused why I have him so high. I don't really understand why this guy is underrated. He has very good defense. He's turn 1 tanking everything in the game for pretty much the rest of the game's lifespan. I think people forget that his multiplicative defense, right, that he gets from his passive, from receiving an attack, it activates before, like, he actually gets hit. So you have his defense up, you just don't ever see it. So anytime you see his defense, you essentially have to either multiply it by 1.5, if you're above 70% HP, I think is what it is. Or if you're below 70% HP, then you multiply by 2, and that's what his true defense is on the turn. And a lot of times that's, you know, maybe 350k, 400k, 300k, somewhere in there, with, you know, 80%, 60%, 40% damage reduction, and then he gets a ton of defense on super attack, you know? It's like if you go for his 12 keys, he gets a 50% multiplicative buff every time he super attacks. So if you can get a super attack off with this guy, there's pretty much nothing in the game that can really hurt him. And then for that first turn, he's able to hold down slot 1 better than a lot of other units. I built my Merge Zamasu with full dodge as well, and like that's really been super helpful. I found it very easy for him to tank normals pretty much at any point in the game. They did give him help. You know, they gave him a AGL Zamasu. They gave him Int Goku Black, the LR, not the base form, the LR Rose. And I do think that this guy is really powerful. You know, I do put a lot of value on his slot 1 ability, even in his base form, which he does have. I have found it easier to get the infinite Zamasu out. One of the reasons is, like I said, a lot of the bosses right now are int, and so you're going a little bit longer in these fights if you're running like a double Zamasu team. So I found that getting to turn 7 and getting his infinite Zamasu out can be fairly consistent, and it hasn't really been like that much of a trouble. Now, his issue is that he's a villain, and that villain units suck. But I wanted to put some respect on him. I think people act like there's this huge gap between him and Future Gohan, and I don't really think there is. And I actually like Zamasu's, you know, domain and standby, or, well, active skill and domain better than Future Gohan's. I think Future Gohan is super good. I actually have him at 3. We can go ahead and fill in the rest of the list here. We have Future Gohan at 3, Bulma at 2, and Orange Piccolo at 1. And we'll get to that. You know, we were close enough. I figured we would just go in and fill in the list here. But it's like, I don't think there's as big of a gap between these two units as people like to pretend there are. Now, I do think Future Gohan is better. I think he is just better defensively. You know, he'll have 80% damage reduction for most of the fight. Granted, it's, you know, post-super attack, so he's not really a slot 1 unit. Like, pretty much ever. Like, you really can't ever run this guy in slot 1. Like, you can get away with it, but you gotta hope, right? Like, his defense is pretty low for a while, you know, until you get, like, his active skill off and you start getting all of his attacks in, things like that. So, for most of the fight, he's really not a slot 1 unit, where I really do values slot 1 viability that he'll have for the rest of the game rest of the game's lifespan. I really do value that a lot. Like, he's going to be a very powerful villain unit that you can bring. Like, if a villain team gets a buff and you can bring this guy, he's going to be a great addition to bring to your team. Good link set, things like that. And if you can get his domain out, which, you know, on villain teams is relatively probable, you know, just because I found that, like, superclass teams, I am at full HP more often on a superclass team than I am on a villain team. I feel like villains tend to get chipped down a little bit easier than superclass teams. So I've actually found his domain on like turn 5 or his 5th turn to be a little bit more consistent than these guys. Even though they have the same condition, they have different units around them. And those villain units around this guy tend to get chipped down just a little bit more than those superclass units. And so his supporting cast, I feel like, has made it easier for me to see his domain more often. So That's just, you know, I do think that this guy's 4. If you wanted to put him down at 7, I get it. But I don't think I would go any lower than 7, and I couldn't go any higher than 4 with this guy. Again, denoting tiers here, you can shift these guys up however you want, but I do think that they're all kind of in this tier right here. You know, I'm not a funny guy who just says, every LR in the game is in the same tier now, ha 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 ha! You know, no, like, that's definitely not the case. There are clear separations, I think, between these units that make them better than others. Alright, so next up we have Future Gohan, like I mentioned. This guy is very powerful. I mean, you put this guy in slot 2, and he is tanking everything in the game. He tanks the Fusion Zamasu AoEs decently well. He takes them only, like, I think the most I've seen him take is, like, 86k or so, which is really good. I will definitely take that. You know, 86k on those normals is a lot better. You know, Trunks is type advantage, and he takes like 100k from those Zamasu AoE normals. So type neutral, being able to take 80k, I will definitely take that from Future Gohan here. And then he has his domain, which is just super powerful. If you can get that out, you know, it's his 5th turn, right? So if you can get that out, very powerful effect. You know, you're doing super damage to all of these extreme class bosses at this point. He has a very powerful active skill with a really good effect. It gives him like 5 ki and 20% defense for the rest of battle. You know, he's doing guaranteed crits. It's pretty easy for him to get keyed, and so he's like quad supering every single turn. Very, very, very powerful unit. The only reason he is not higher is because the 2 units above him are just way too busted and do way too much for the other units. Bulma. If you can bring Bulma, you bring Bulma. Bulma helps LR Rose. Bulma helps Piccolo. Bulma helps these guys. Bulma helps everybody. Just incredible unit. Like, anytime it's like, oh, can I bring Bulma on this team? Yes, we bring Bulma. It's like, you pick your leader unit, and then the next question, like if you have a flowchart, is can I bring Bulma? If yes, bring Bulma. Because she's going to be giving you the support. You know, she's Rainbow Orb changing. She guards. She has damage reduction. And it's pretty easy for her to double super. Absolutely incredible masterclass unit design by, like, Dokkan designing Bulma. She's going to be, like, in this top of the list here for a long time, unless they do crazy things with power creep. The only reason she's not higher, part of it's leader skill, but Orange Piccolo is just built different. Bulma's great. She really helps you. Like units that would struggle for ki, you know, like maybe, like Ultimate Gohan, she really helps out like a character like Ultimate Gohan, and they do share some teams, you know, so it's like you bring her, and she just gives 3 ki to a character like this who struggles for ki normally, and so now he's operating better, and it makes your team better as a result. Like, she's doing that. That 2-turn support that she has is so valuable. She can go in slot 1. She'll take some damage, though, in slot 1 until, like, I don't know, her 4th turn or something like that, where she's still, or maybe like her, like, once she has about 21% damage reduction built up or something like that, and she still has her guard up, then you can start putting her in slot 1, and she can do okay. You know, you could get lucky with dodging. I think Bulma's a full dodge character, so, you know, that does help. But Orange Piccolo is, like, one of the only characters on this list that can just go slot 1 versus these big bosses and just tank, like, and just do his job. And then, like, there's a lot of superheroes right now, so you can get this guy to turn 3. You can get his, you know, giant form. If not turn 3, what is it, turn 5? Is it 5 that you can get his, giant Piccolo out? Let me double check here. You know, just on the fly, we can check this real quick. There he is. There's Orange Piccolo. What is it if it's not turn 3? Oh, 6th turn. But it's from the start of battle. So, it's not from his first turn. Like, it's not his 6th turn. It's just turn 6. You get to turn 6, and you get Orange Piccolo out, and he does a ton of damage. He generally is going to be able to burn up any boss charges, right? So it's like AoEs. If there's any AoEs later in the fight, he can just eat those up. Healing, he just eats those up. You know, super attacks, he eats those, and it protects your entire rotation. It's like, oh, okay, we have Orange Piccolo on this rotation. We can use that. Now we know that after we get out of it, there's not going to be any AoEs, or there's not going to be any super attacks, assuming that the boss burns all their charges while you're in Orange Piccolo. And that is super valuable to your team. Just knowing that you have a character who on his first, like, 2 turns is going to be able to tank pretty much anything in slot 1 super well from any fight in the game, as long as his, you know, full buff is up. You get him into his giant form, and, you know, obviously you do a ton of damage, and you cancel, like, the boss abilities. And then he's also leading a pretty good team. Battle of Wits and Superheroes is still a pretty good team. He's a great linking partner with Bulma. He's on a lot of teams. And he's just like overall a really powerful unit. The only reason he hasn't been won in the past is because I didn't think his giant form was as needed as it is now. His giant form can just really protect you in a lot of these fights. And now we're at the point too where it's like he's one of the only units on this list that like he's actually probably the best slot 1 tank on this list other than like this guy on turn 1. Like if we look at this list right here, there is nobody else I would rather have in slot 1 than this guy. Like slot 1, turn 1, this guy's tanking the best on this list, other than maybe this guy. Like that's it though. And then turn 3, this guy's tanking better than this guy, so it just puts this guy up higher. And then from there, it's like if you're running a superhero team, or if you have enough superhero characters that you can get this guy's active skill out on turn 3, I mean it's over. Just what he can do for a team is just special. It really is. And then he also has the heal. Like I mentioned, you can kind of get whittled down in these fights, and we have like Fusion Zamasu. I've gotten this guy's heal off in that Fusion Zamasu fight a couple of times, so this is my list. This is my top 10 LRs in Dokkan. Again, I think people are going to be pretty upset with this list. I think there's going to be a lot of, like dissent. But I don't think many people are going to disagree with the units that I've chosen as the top 10. I think that we'd just be arguing order a little bit. Probably some people would want to try to get this unit in there, but I mean, honestly, who am I putting in this list over them? If I were to do, like, honorable mentions, surprisingly, this guy would probably be an honorable mention. Just because these new red zone fights are so short that you can typically end it before he becomes a huge liability. And then there's also a lot of int phases, so this guy can have some usage. Maybe them, maybe you. This kid Gohan, I really like him. I think he was disrespected, but I really don't like running him in these new fights. And the AoE bosses really hurt this guy, so can't really add him. And then we just have like every other LR in the game right here. Yeah, we should have Dr. Wheelo up at 10 now. But yeah, this is my top 10 list right here. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know how you would rank these units. Let me know if there's anything that you really disagree with me about. But again, if you're saying, like, oh, Fusion Zamasu should be 7 and he should be 4, like, okay, fine, sure, I agree with you, Again, these denote tiers. And if you want to, like, shuffle these guys around a little bit, you can. But I think Orange Piccolo is pretty comfortably at number 1, and I think Bulma is pretty comfortably number 2. But you guys let me know what you think. I guess one drawback for Bulma is that she doesn't have many teams. Like, technically, she's not on a lot of teams, but the teams she has, she is so useful on, and they're all meta-relevant teams that I don't think it really matters. Not many characters in the game have, like, a ton of teams. There are characters who have a ton of categories, like God Goku, for example, but there's not many characters that have a lot of teams, because there aren't many teams in general to run. There's only, like, a few meta-relevant teams right now, so let me know what you guys think. Let me know your thoughts on this. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I'm going to catch you guys next time.